You got it.
Good morning. I'm here today with Darren Gallop, the CEO of Securicy. Good afternoon in your case, Darren. How you doing?
Doing well. How about yourself?
I'm doing well. It's a beautiful day here in Northern California. It's going up into the 90s today.
I cannot say the same here in northern Nova Scotia. It's well, we go Celsius first off, so we're 10 degrees, which I'm saying is probably about 68, but it's raining and cloudy today. So
Yes, I know. we're supposed to cool down this weekend, so hopefully, I actually would prefer those little lower temperatures. It's pretty hot here right now. So,
yeah.
Can you share a brief background of yourself and your work experience?
Yeah, so from 45 years old, basically straight out of university, I went directly into the music industry, initially as a performer. So I was, I always played music growing up and sort of took this sort of like, hey, I want to give this a crack. It's because if I don't, I'll always ask the question. And now I don't have to ask that question anymore. I know the answer. Yeah, I spent about 5 or 6 years, I guess, like exclusively just performing all the time, doing recording stuff. Started a record label by about year 6, year 7, I was really getting sort of feeling like the road life is not really my long-term game in life. And, certainly enjoyed it, especially in the early years. Had a lot of fun, met a lot of great people, played a lot of great music, played with a lot of great people, but, started looking for a way to get off the road and have a more normal sort of schedule and not stick away from the late nights and all the other temptations that exist in that world. So started a record label. It wasn't a great time to start a record label. It was just before all the record labels started doing mass layoffs here in Canada. So that was my first kick of really building a business, like setting up a corporation and hiring people and building a business, and ran that for about 3 years. Had a couple of decent releases, but in the end, I just basically decided to shut that up and then made my leap into software. And in 2008, I started a company by the name of Mercado. And that actually built the software, the back end for a lot of the major music festivals in Canada, and the US, and Europe. So that tool is still used as far as I sold the company a few years ago, but as far as I'm aware, they're still being used by Burning Man and Bonnaroo and Coachella and Just for Laughs Festival, X Games, a pile of big festivals and events around the world. And so that was my first sort of foray of still in the music industry, but into sort of startups and the software world. That introduced me to cybersecurity and data governance and privacy and all the regulations and all of the due diligence processes that large organizations or sophisticated medium organizations generally put their vendors through. And security became a really big component for Mercado in the sense that we were selling to large corporations as well as the smaller festivals, and we had a lot of very confidential data being stored on that platform, so we needed to really up our game from a security perspective. So I dove in really deeply, took lots of after work and weekend courses online using some of the wonderful tools that are out there that allow you to learn anything you want from home without having to sign up and move to somewhere to go to university. So that was really great. Learned a lot about security, implemented it in real time in the business while I was learning it, brought in help where we needed it. And I ended up going on doing my CISSP. That's the Certified Information Systems Security Professional designation from the ISC squared. And, as I was sort of framing up the end of the Mercado days and as my acquisition was starting to materialize, I started Securicy. And I was just really enjoyed cybersecurity. It was a really fast learning process for me because I had a technical background. I spent my whole life using computers in every facet, even like from the early music days, producing records using Macs back in the day when, you'd buy a hard drive this big that would store like 80 gigabytes and it would be $500 or something. And,
I know.
I just, having run a software company and built a software platform with a team of engineers, it was a really fast learn. And a lot of cybersecurity concepts and privacy concepts make a lot of sense when you understand the domain that you're applying them to. So, one of the things that we were seeing is out there just talking to other people in the software world, in the SaaS world, in the startup community, is that all the questions and the due diligence that they were being put through was on the rise really rapidly. So we were seeing like all of the hacking that's happening, and all the privacy laws like GDPR and CCPA that have come out really have sort of taken the velocity and the depth at which the scrutiny that you're going to be put through selling to customers that you have to go through, right? So we saw that opportunity starting to materialize a couple of years ago. That was really the motivator to build Securicy, like looking at the fact that there's a lot of there's a talent void of security talent, but there's a lot more people that need to be securing things, and everybody's moving more and more stuff to the cloud, and so the landscape for the hackers is growing. And at the end of the day, the hackers make a lot more money than they make a lot of money. That's why they do it. And so we saw the opportunity there and dove in, and now we're about 3 years into building this platform and really starting to get some traction with that, and having a great time working with a lot of interesting startups that are primarily selling to enterprise, whether it's fintech or healthcare, SaaS companies that are doing that are touching the infrastructure or taking and storing and processing data of larger organizations is really where we're specialized.
Very good. So what has been your experience with remote employment?
Well, so we're in Cape Breton Island, Nova Scotia, and so that's for those who don't who aren't familiar with that. That's like go all the way east to Canada and up north a little bit. And you can find Cape Breton Island, Nova Scotia. We're an island of 100,000 people. There's not really a very large ecosystem of technology companies. So, when you're looking for things like digital marketing and Ruby on Rails developers and all these types of skill sets, it's challenging in such a small market. So, for me, both in Securicy and in my previous company, we've always had experience of working with people remotely. Now, in the last company in Marcato, there's even a lot of times where myself and or other people on the team would be going on site during the festivals, whether it's Burning Man or Coachella or Bonnaroo, and be working there as well. So we often, I think, for me, I've always had that experience of collaborating with people, having employees that are remote, being remote myself. For a while, my co-founder and myself and a few of our employees at Securicy were shacked up in Boston for the winter doing the Techstars Boston program, while the rest of the team was here in Cape Breton. So, I've never been, this is the first time I've been full remote, where like literally everybody on the project or everybody at the company is remote, but I've had remote experiences through my entire career. Like currently right now we have 3 employees, actually 4 employees that are essentially that aren't in Cape Breton, that don't live in Cape Breton. Now everything's like a leveling playing field now, because most of us in the Cape Breton office see each other, would normally see each other a lot of the time. We did have a work from home if you feel like you have the sniffles or you're tired, you don't feel great, or we were usually pretty open to let people work at home, generally asking people to come in for Friday when we do our big team activities and our big team meetup and stuff. But we always had people leaving, coming in and out, but this is the first time that we're like all the time just 100% remote, and I haven't actually seen or hung out with the team face to face in quite some time.
Interesting. And what's your takeaway from it, since it's, was forced on us basically back in March? I know in the US it was March. I don't know about Canada.
Yeah, no, it was pretty similar timing, I would say. Early March for Nova Scotia when the shutdown started to happen. I mean, there's some parts of it, I would say, that overall I think our productivity is really good. There's a lot of distraction and a lot of time waste that happens going to the office. It starts from just like getting everything together in the morning before you go to work. Like I love that I can just get up, make a cup of coffee, make a smoothie, and just start working. Mm-hmm. And then I can have take a gym break halfway. Like I got all these things going on now in my schedule that I wasn't able to do before, that would, to take a gym break at the office means you got to take a gym bag, and then you're going to go to the gym, and you're probably going to have a shower and get changed. Like that's just, and then there's lunch. I mean, we all say, I'll pack a lunch so I don't have to leave for lunch, but we don't. I always struggle to stay consistent with that, bringing a lunch. So then it's like, oh, damn, I'm hungry, I need to eat something. And then you go out and you wait in line, you wait for somebody to make you food. Like there's all these inefficiencies, plus the commute. Now, I mean, we're in Cape Breton, we don't have a lot of traffic, so we don't get a lot of, just 1 second there. We don't get a lot of commute time, but it's still time, right? And I think, and then there's a lot of conversations where people are just hanging out at the office chatting. some of that's waste, some of that's good bonding and can be good
Right.
ways to communicate too. But I think like there's that productivity thing. Now I don't have kids at home, and so like I know there's people on our team that do have children, and with no school and no daycares and stuff like that, I think like, you know, depending on your home environment, I think it gets more difficult if you don't have it, if you're living with other people, especially children. You know, if you don't have a lot of space in your home, if you don't have, you know, a designated workspace, I think, you know, all these things sort of start to make it less productive or more challenging for certain individuals.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I think for me, I'm just now, like, I'm just for the first times missing some hang time. Like I'm with the team, and I find like, yes, you know, it's forced us to tighten up some communication models, like where you're not going to hear about stuff next to the water cooler. You know, have to like use Slack more intelligently, or, you know, an internal newsletter, or like, you know, we've done weekly meetings where we get together and we demo what everyone's done, and, you know, chat a little bit. But it's still, you know, we're still humans, and like there's still times, like I think this week I'm feeling it more than anything. Like there's some things that I just wish I could just pull together 5 or 6 people and woodshed some ideas, and like it'd be nice to go out and have a beer after work with a couple of my employees, right? So I do feel a little bit of that. But I mean, ultimately speaking, you know, I think if you have the proper communication and you create absolute clarity on goals and priorities, and use good PM software, and take the time to reach out, like you can notice when you're working in a small team and you're working in the same office, you can notice when somebody's off, or if they're consecutively off for a while, if something's going on. You know, you have to almost proactively have a plan or a cadence to see that, to have that same insight and depth on how people on your team are doing. So I think, like, you know, you just have to build up better communication and better reporting, greater transparency. Now that's going to help even if we go back to the office, like all those types of things are going to help as well. And, you know, I think it also helps us as a team understand what things are like for our remote employees that are always remote. So I was mentioning the 4 people we have in our team that aren't in our office, right? So, you know, I think it helps us become, because I think a lot of the activities we may do in the office, they're excluded. I mean, we always invite them, like, hey, if you want to get in your car and drive down for 4 hours, but like, come on, right?
Yeah, I know.
So I think, you know, I think it's forced us to find ways that we can involve the team. And I think the reality is, like, for our company, we're just starting to hit that growth trajectory right now. We're just starting to think about, like, probably, you know, getting more serious about an institutional fundraise in the fall and things like that. And we're going to have to grow our team, and we're going to be doing that quickly. And, you know, we love the idea of supporting local, but at the same time, as I said to you earlier, sometimes if you're building a startup, you need special sets of skills. So, and those are hard to find in a town of 32,000 or 35,000 people. So, you know, we are deliberately building up this ability to scale quickly by having people in other parts of the world.
Yeah, it's interesting. We kind of have the opposite problem here. There's 6 million people where I live. So, and, you know, a lot of them here have engineering degrees. So before COVID hit, I mean, we had the opposite problem where, you know, people couldn't keep their good employees. They were going, you know, they were jumping jobs like crazy.
Yeah, and I hear that from other founders that I speak with in the big cities. So I guess that's kind of one of the cool, like for us, for example, most of our dev team is here in Cape Breton. Most of our software development team. And generally the ecosystem here, there's not that many software players. So, and most of us, like most of the entrepreneurs that are tech entrepreneurs here, know each other really well. So it's very rare. There's no sort of aggressive poaching. And it's much more a small town community where we're all buds and we all hang out and try to support each other as much as we can. So, you know, it's very common that you could bring in, then we do this, like we bring in, there's a program that generates junior developers. We generally every year take a couple off the program that we think are the stronger ones. And you can actually make that investment of having somebody, because I mean, a lot of the times these junior developers, they're not going to come in and be impactful right away. They're going to be taking more resources to get them up to speed to some degree, depending on, you know, what you're doing and the skill level of the student. But, you know, we can make those investments and still have that person in 4 or 5 years. And like when I look back at my last startup, I had developers for 6 or 7 years, right? And like, Yeah, so it's a different environment, so we don't have that problem. But I know, talking to a lot of other startups that we work with, they do have that problem of, you get somebody in there, and then 4 months later they get a good off, they get a better offer down the road, or somebody's selling some ESOPs and with the next hot thing or whatever, and then boom, they're gone. You barely got any value. You just got this person to the point where they're actually starting to generate
Right.
valuable code, and now you have to go back to the drawing board and start again. So that's really tough.
Yeah, it is. So what do you think is the future of remote employment, and what do you think can be done differently to make it more effective?
Yeah, so I mean, I think COVID-19 is just like, I think it'll set the record straight. Like, there's a lot of people out there that, like, I don't want to go back to the office. Like, are they going to make me go back to the office, right? And I think what that does is, I think people that enjoy the remote working, that really, because not everybody enjoys it. There are people that would rather get in the car and drive to work and park their car and go through all that, but actually have that social interaction with people in person in an office environment. But for those who don't, that realize that they can do good work, and that the ones who fall in love with working from home, and I think there's going to be a lot of them. I think that for organizations that don't decide to have some continual work from home capacity there, where they can keep those people engaged, then I think those people will go out to the other companies out there that are essentially going to go, you know what, this remote thing's good. I think there's going to be a lot of companies too. So there's going to be a lot of remote opportunities. I think there's going to be a lot of companies that are like, wow, we're actually really productive. We can do this. I was always afraid to do this because it just seemed unnatural, but hey, it works. And then that opens up the mind where people that are in the big city that can go, well, maybe I'm not going to hire my developers in New York. Maybe I'm going to find a way to find a team that I can build that's more, that's going to have more longevity, or maybe I'm going to be able to have more control over my culture, or more control over things, and not be confined to the limitations or the challenges of my region. So, like, for me, for example, the limitations of my region are different than the limitations for somebody who's in New York City. New York City, it's what you're talking about. It's like, there's so much opportunity there, and there's so much demand for developers that it's hard to keep people in there unless you really have they really like the project, the team, and they're really, really engaged. Versus in my situation, we don't have a whole bunch of lead. Like, all we get is junior developers, unless randomly somebody moves here from away, or we can recruit somebody to move, which we do manage to pull that off time to time. But our challenge is, if we say raise $10 million in a couple of weeks or months, and we'd say, hey, we want to hire 15 developers that do this, we can't do that here. So we have to go, but that's amazing, because that means, like, I think that you're going to see a lot more companies popping up, and a lot more growth of companies in rural areas, because the work from home kind of creates a level playing field. And there's going to be a lot of people out there looking to leave the companies that don't want to provide that work from home post-COVID. And there's going to be a lot of companies out there that are going to be able to get, attract really great talent.
Yeah, no, I agree. I actually think going forward, when everything settles down, I think it's going to be more of a hybrid model. It's going to be up to the employee. We have the office, and the office is going to look different. And if they want to come in, say from 10 to 2, 3 times a week, they can. But if not, they want to work from home, that's also will be accepted.
And so what you're saying right there is exactly the conversation that we're having internally. Is like, our office lease is up in October. Originally, we were thinking about upgrading to having like a bigger office, like, because we had outgrown. We were like literally at the point of almost opening up another blockage of square footage and expand our office, because I had given away right before COVID, I had given my office to a new salesperson, and I left and went on vacation. And then the plan was I was going to come back, and then we were going to rent out another piece of building and expand on her. And then I came home, and then the office was empty, and we just all went there and pillaged all the good chairs and screens and stuff. So actually we've talked about that. We've talked about looking at the real estate we have now, keeping it as it is, or potentially downsizing it slightly, and creating it more of like one big room, like the big room with one big desk, and a screen, and then like a hangout spot with a fridge, and just have it be a place that if somebody wants to go to the office, they can go to the office. But there's not an expectation to go to the office. There's not a requirement to go to the office. We may have events where we would like those who can go to the office to go to them. But I know, like, I do know there's people that would just love, like, when I surveyed my team, I think we're 17 people. I think there were 2 people that preferred working from the office, and then like, 4 or 5 that liked the idea of a bit of both.
Mhm.
But I think generally speaking, most people like the idea of being able to be at home. And it's motivated. That's all motivated me to. I'm actually building an office on my property. So I'm building a small little cabin down by the water. I'm on a waterfront property here around the river. My home is up on the hill, and it kind of goes down over the hill. And so I'm gonna build something down there that's literally going to be my home office, and I'm just really excited to have that space. And I think that's the model. Like, I really think you've hit the nail on the head there for sure.
Yeah, cool. So you've talked a little bit about Securicy. So what is the story behind your company, and what's the journey been like?
Yeah. So my last company, we're selling into the festival industry with some back end technology to manage logistics, and we started off with a lot of smaller festivals, regional festivals up here in Canada. And the questions around security or data privacy were like, is it secure, or where's the data? Like, people asking questions because they feel like they need to have some emotional attachment to trust in this scenario, but not necessarily diving deeper, understanding what's safe and what's not. And when we started to migrate up market, we started to work with like Coachella and Burning Man and Bonnaroo and these big festivals, some of which are large, like corporately owned, or with Bonnaroo, it's a Live Nation property, it's a publicly traded company, right? So the level of scrutiny and that we would receive from these types of customers was very different than anything we'd ever seen. And we struggled with it initially. I mean, I remember getting that first security questionnaire, and there was like 200 questions, and we didn't even know what half of them, the questions meant at the time. And we're going back several years here now. We lost a really big deal, a deal that would have made up greater than 10 or 15% of the company's revenue. That would have been, really would have put us on the map in Europe on a whole different way, would have changed the trajectory of the company. We lost it because we didn't have the security posture, and because we had a couple of years of developing and architecting technology without thinking about that from a security perspective. It wasn't like we could just turn a switch and be secure. And the timing, like the deal was like, the way that it went, and unfortunately this happens a lot in enterprise, is like the marketing department's buying your product. So it's back, forth. You go through all of the process. You get to the point where you're like, oh my God, this deal's closed. Like we just got, they want to do this. They've got approval, a budget, everything's good. And then a security questionnaire comes, and you're like, whoa, what the hell's this, right?
Yep.
And so for us, the deal was closed in our minds. Like we were like, the champagne bottles were open kind of thing. And then this questionnaire came in. There was a very tight window because like a lot, like, you think enterprise do everything better, but a lot of times enterprise are also at the last minute. And it was like the last minute, this deal had closed verbally at the last minute that it would be logical for us to onboard everything and get it up to speed for the next festival cycle. So the time it took to fix all of our issues and get clearance, we had missed the cycle. So we had missed the whole festival year, and there was just really no interest on that customers because they solved the problem elsewhere. Like to them, it was like, well, oh great, you guys don't even have your shit together. You can't even solve it. Like, right? So that really had a big effect on the business. And so what that did is that created that was the beginning of understanding, okay, this is what you have to do to sell enterprise. We, over the next year, built a great security program for our business because we was like, I'm never letting this happen again. This is never going to happen in this business. So I was spending a lot of my time studying security, taking online courses, reading books. I did my CISSP. We documented all our policies, programs, procedures. We re-architected parts of our application, brought in pen testers, put vulnerability management tools, firewalls, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Got completely immersed in security, got our security to the point where it was really, really strong. And so when I did that, I was communicating the story of that with other entrepreneurs and realizing that every entrepreneur that's selling to businesses, that especially when there's software or there's any sort of technology involved or data sharing involved, are being put through the same type of this process of due diligence. So I saw the wave, and GDPR was just sort of in the very infancy of the bill being built out and drafted out. But the future was really clear that we're entering into a world where cybercrime is through the roof. and businesses are a big target. Supply chain's a big target. And I just, I looked at the future as in, you're going to have a security program and tools to manage that in your tech company, no matter what size it is. The same way you have a CRM, like a Salesforce, the same way as you have a website. And if you don't have these things, you're not going to be able to do business. So I saw that future, and now, fast forward a couple of years, 3 years into Securicy, we're seeing that's really really happened. And so what our platform essentially does is it asks you questions about your business. It almost emulates what that initial engagement is with a consultant. So understanding, what do you do? Who do you do it for? What volume do you do it? What types of data do you store? Is there PII? If so, personal information or person identifiable information? If so, of citizens from whom? What types of data? Like, just all these pieces are captured through a question process that the system takes the entrepreneur or the CTO or whoever's running this initiative in the organization. Based on that, it'll come out and say, okay, well, you need to be compliant with GDPR. You need to look at CCPA. There might be some other state regulations or whatnot. And there'll be a security protocols or security controls, whether they're coming from NIST or SOC principles or CIS or any one of the sort of bodies that generate control sets and documentation around security benchmarking. And so from there, the process then navigates the user through configuring their policies. So this is not like, here's a bunch of templates, good luck. This is like, here are the policies you need to be compliant with these things. And then it goes through and asks you further questions. So for example, if you're going into, password management around a policy to do with passwords, we're going to ask questions like, well, how many passwords do people have? Are you using single sign-on? What are the tools you're using? And then based on that, sorry, I thought I had that off before I started this. Based on all of that, it's going to generate a policy that is really, really tailored to your company and the things your company should be doing within the context of the activities and the tools and the size of your company. It takes all of that, breaks it down into projects, gives guidance on how to implement that, and recommends tools or services when it's applicable. So for example, if it says like, you have a web app, you have data in your web app. Have you ever done a pen test? No. Click here, you need to do a pen test. And then, scope the pen test out. It'll market it out through our marketplace, find you a reasonably priced qualified pen tester that knows that domain and that environment that can really get in there and do that. And then, once you get that program up and running and you sort of met those requirements, it's one of these things that you don't just set up your security program and then ignore it and go back to doing all the things the way you've always been doing them. There's cadences, there's checkpoints, there's testing, there's updating, there's meetings, there's things that you need to do to maintain a security program, right across your organization. So the tool will set up the cadences, remind people of what they need to do, when they need to do it. And then at the end, you have this reporting mechanism that when stakeholders, investors, acquirers, customers are asking you about your security policies or your security posture, or if they're asking about your compliance with a specific control set or privacy law, you can go in and generate a report that day, like a salesperson can go and generate that report. And providing that you're actually staying up to date and actually doing this, then you have real good transparency that you can provide to customers. And then, that just creates greater assurance, it speeds up the process of closing the deal, and it reduces the likelihood that they're going to start asking a lot of tough questions or really diving in as deep. Because I think a lot of companies don't realize when somebody asks you about your security and you can't answer the questions, like any security auditor goes, oh, okay, we gotta really peel the layers of the onion off here, because these guys aren't able to demonstrate something quick and transparent. And then they start asking for audit documents and they start asking for all this stuff. So being really proactive, having that organized, being able to present that posture really clearly to your customers, and now your board. Like if you Google cybersecurity and the board, I mean, you're going to see this whole trend of, security is now a board level topic. This is not just something for the IT guys in the IT room. It's the board. It needs to be articulated from a perspective of risk. It's an operational risk. It's an opportunity potentially, and it needs to be articulated at that level. There needs to be budget. You can't just say, oh yeah, the IT guys got that. I mean, you got to resource these people, and you have to understand what the other soft parts of security and privacy are. It's not just your routers and your firewalls and your endpoints. It's, are your people aware? Do they know what they're allowed to do and what they're not? Are they aware of what what data you store and who's allowed to do what, and are there checkpoints here? Is senior management leading by example, or is the CEO running around with all his passwords written down on his notepad, despite the fact that everybody else has to do use LastPass or whatever? So that's kind of the thing there that we try to go right across the organization and build it as a program, as a pillar in the company.
Yeah, wow, that's a lot. So the current pandemic caused a lot of companies, almost basically every company, to go remote, and that caused a lot of challenges and roadblocks that a lot of companies didn't expect. You being a security company, I'm assuming you had that part of it taken care of. But did that cause any roadblocks or challenges that you didn't expect?
Yeah, I mean, for us, where we already had a work, like people working from home, either full time or part time, we already had the security coverage. The only thing I would say is we did rely on some tech that's set in our offices that would do checks on computers to make sure things were good, but we were able to replicate that with other cloud-based technology. I mean, generally from a security perspective, for us, it hasn't changed anything, but I've certainly seen it change a lot of things for a lot of our customers. I mean, we have customers, most of our startups are like, everyone has a MacBook Pro and all their mails in Google. And so like the same security, if they've already implemented security controls in their business, often like, if you work out of a WeWork, you treat a WeWork like an unsafe environment. So it's like working out of a coffee shop, right? So if you've met the requirements or you've built a security program around that type of business, then moving to home is not really increasing too much risk, essentially, or in some cases, it's not increasing risk at all. Where we really saw the problems is where there was organizations where most people were actually going to a workstation that was at the office. And now that workstation is still at the office. And now they've had people, using their own personal equipment to access systems. And I'm personally not a huge fan of that. I would much rather give people a company laptop and allow them some sort of articulated personal usage. So personal usage within some limits, within protocols. I would rather that and have the control and ability to make sure that the computer's backing up the company information, that there's endpoint protection reporting, there's virus signatures or any other anomalies, that we know that the machines are being updated with the latest security patches. Like, I would rather that than having somebody use their own computer, because it's very difficult to have. You can't really control people's own hardware. And so you can have, if they're using their home computer on their home network with their home router, their home Wi-Fi, with all their other gadgets and trinkets and everything else in that environment, then it's a tough environment to technically to manage. But as soon as you issue a company laptop and they're on that, and you've got it on, permanently operating via VPN over, so that you're segregating, and you can still secure that machine in that respect. But I think that's been one of the biggest growing pains, I think, are the organizations that already didn't have sort of this policy. And then we see a lot in startups. There's a lot of startups that, everybody just works off their own laptop. It's like, well, what do they have access to, and what are you doing to ensure, those laptops? So I've always, same thing in my last company. Like, we purchased laptops for every employee. You were allowed to use that for a defined personal usage. If you wanted to do personal things outside that definition, then we recommend you go find yourself a laptop or a home computer for those things. If you're just checking Facebook and Twitter and watching YouTube videos and Zoom with your family after dinner, then absolutely you're allowed to use use the company computer to do that.
Yeah, no, I understand. It caused a lot of headaches. I mean, I've been in the same boat, and $1,500 per employee saves a lot of potential headaches down the road. It really does.
It really does.
So there are companies like Gaper that help develop, build, and scale products, especially for startups. We've talked about this a little bit, but how important do you think this will be going forward for companies like yourself and other startups that need to hire, very specific talents, and they need to hire them in a hurry?
Yeah, I think it's really important to have access to the right talent and not to settle. And depending on what you're doing and where you are, you may not have access to that talent, or you may not have access to that talent at an affordable price, which, you know, if you're trying to find a really good senior AI engineer in San Francisco right now, that's not a cheap
Mhm.
purchase, right? So you're either going to have that person come in as a co-founder and they're going to own a substantial chunk of your company, or you're going to be paying them a lot of money.
Mhm.
And so, you know, I think, and a lot of the times, I think, you know, for startups and early stage companies, especially, it's speed is moving quickly is important. You can lose a lot of time. You can you can lose a year of traction against the competitive landscape by making a couple of not great hires, not even total shit hires. Like, I mean, just not great hires. If your
Mhm.
competitor is making the great hires and you're making mediocre hires, you know,
Yeah.
you can get left in the smoke there. So, you know, I think it's really critical that organizations open their mind to that. Those that aren't open minded to that, and utilize that as a way to expand. And I think the same thing happens when you get to growth stage. So, you know, you've had a small team, like maybe you're an 8 or 5 or 10 person team, and now you get some funding and you've figured out a bit of a solution to what's working here, and you want to move quick. That can be really hard. That can be really hard to do if you're not constantly, as a CEO, working a pipeline of hires before you have the capacity to do so.
Yeah.
As you know, as everyone knows, being the founder, being the CEO of a tech company, there's always too many things to do. You can never do all the things you should be doing, so you have to sort of pick your battles, right? So, you know, I think it makes a lot of sense, to be able to use a tool like that to get the talent you need quickly, and to be able to, you know, move around talent and change roles as you need. You might need different talent in 3 years than you need right now, for example.
Yes, absolutely. Well, Darren, I want to thank you for your time today. This has been very informative, and I wish you a great day.
Awesome. Thank you very much.